At a bustling airport terminal, a woman's bag spilled open under the scrutiny of security, revealing contents that stunned onlookers and unraveled a secret she'd guarded for years, exposing a truth that would change everything. The airport was a hive of activity that morning, with travelers weaving through the terminal, their voices blending into a hum of anticipation and impatience. Among them was a woman named Elena Marquez, a figure who moved with quiet confidence, her dark hair pulled back neatly, her attire unremarkable yet polished, a navy blazer, white blouse and tailored trousers. She carried a single black leather satchel, her only luggage, slung over her shoulder as she approached the security checkpoint at Denver International Airport. To those around her, she was just another passenger, perhaps a businesswoman or a frequent flyer, blending seamlessly into the crowd. But the contents of her bag would soon draw every eye in the vicinity and set off a chain of events that would expose a truth she had meticulously hidden. Elena stepped up to the conveyor belt, placing her satchel into a gray plastic bin. She removed her shoes and jacket, her movements practiced and efficient, betraying no hint of unease. The line moved slowly, and she stood patiently, her expression neutral, her eyes scanning the crowd with the casual alertness of someone accustomed to observing their surroundings. The security officer, a middle-aged man with a stern face, waved her through the metal detector. She passed without issue, but as she reached for her bin, another officer, a younger woman with sharp eyes, flagged her bag for a manual inspection. "Ma'am, we need to check your bag," the officer said, her tone professional but firm. Elena nodded, her face betraying no emotion, though her fingers tightened briefly on the strap of her jacket. The officer gestured for Elena to step aside, and a small crowd of travelers began to gather, drawn by the subtle shift in atmosphere that suggested something unusual was unfolding. The officer unzipped the satchel and began to remove its contents one by one, placing them on the table with deliberate care. A laptop, a charger, a small notebook with a plain cover, a pen, a water bottle. Ordinary items, unremarkable in their familiarity. The crowd's curiosity waned slightly. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But then the officer reached deeper, her hand pausing as she pulled out a small, locked metal box, no larger than a paperback book. It was heavy, its surface scratched and worn, as if it had been carried for years. The officer glanced at Elena, who stood motionless, her gaze fixed on the box. "Ma'am, can you open this?" the officer asked, her voice now tinged with curiosity. Elena hesitated, just for a moment before stepping forward. "It's personal," she said softly, her voice steady but low. "I'd prefer to open it in private." The officer shook her head. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we need to inspect it here." The crowd pressed closer, their murmurs growing louder. Elena's jaw tightened, but she nodded, reaching into her pocket for a small key. As she unlocked the box, the air seemed to thicken with anticipation. The lid opened with a faint creak, and the officer peered inside. Her eyes widened, and she stepped back, her hand instinctively moving to her radio. Inside the box were several items: a passport with a different name, Clara Valles, a stack of foreign currency in multiple denominations, a small encrypted USB drive, and a photograph of a young girl no older than 10 with Elena's unmistakable eyes. But what drew the officer's attention most was a slim, black device, its surface etched with unfamiliar symbols, unlike any technology she had ever seen. The crowd gasped, their whispers turning into a chorus of speculation. "Is that a bomb?" someone muttered. "Looks like spy stuff," another voice chimed in. Elena's face remained impassive, but her eyes darted toward the exit, calculating. The officer called for her supervisor, and within moments, 2 more agents arrived, their expressions serious. They escorted Elena to a small room off the main terminal, her bag and its contents carefully collected as evidence. The crowd dispersed, but the story of the mysterious woman and her bag spread quickly, fueled by the intrigue of what had been found. In the interrogation room, Elena sat across from a senior TSA agent, a man named Agent Harris, whose lined face suggested years of experience. He studied the items from the box, his brow furrowed. "Ms. Marquez, or is it Ms. Valles? You have some explaining to do," he said, holding up the passport. Elena leaned back in her chair, her hands folded calmly in her lap. It's Marquez, she said. The other name is complicated. Then uncomplicate it, Harris said, his tone sharp. This passport, this device, the currency, it's not the kind of thing people carry for a weekend trip. Who are you, really? Elena took a slow breath, her mind racing. She had always known this moment might come, but she had hoped to avoid it. For years, she had lived a carefully constructed life, one built on layers of secrecy and misdirection. But now, with her bag opened in public, the truth was clawing its way to the surface. Elena began to speak, her voice measured, as if choosing each word with care. She explained that she was born in a small town in New Mexico, raised by a single mother who worked long hours to provide for her. But her childhood was far from ordinary. At 16, she had been recruited by a shadowy organization, one that operated in the gray areas of international law. They trained her in languages, cryptography, and surveillance, molding her into an operative who could slip in and out of countries unnoticed. The passport bearing the name Clara Valles was one of many aliases she had used over the years, each tied to a mission she could not disclose. The device, she claimed, was a prototype, a communication tool developed by a private tech firm she had worked with during her last assignment. She refused to elaborate on its purpose, citing confidentiality, but assured Harris it was not dangerous. The currency was for emergencies, a precaution for someone who had spent years moving through unstable regions. As for the photograph, her voice softened when she mentioned it. That's my daughter, she said. She lives with her father now. I haven't seen her in years. Harris listened, his expression unreadable. He asked probing questions, trying to poke holes in her story, but Elena's responses were consistent, her demeanor unshaken. She admitted to working for an organization that no longer existed, dissolved after a scandal she refused to discuss. She insisted she was now retired, living a quiet life as a consultant, traveling only for work. But the contents of her bag told a different story, one of someone still entangled in a world of secrets. The interrogation lasted hours, with Harris consulting his superiors and cross-referencing Elena's story with databases that yielded little information. Her aliases were clean, her records sparse. Whoever she was, she had covered her tracks well. But the photograph of the girl intrigued Harris. He pressed her for details, sensing it was the key to understanding her. Elena's composure faltered briefly, her eyes glistening as she spoke of her daughter, Sophia, who lived in California with her ex-husband. I left to protect her, she said. My work. It wasn't safe for her to be near me. By the time Elena was released, the airport had returned to its usual rhythm, but the incident lingered in the minds of those who had witnessed it. The TSA kept the device for further analysis, but Elena was allowed to leave with her bag and its remaining contents. She boarded her flight to Chicago, her expression as unreadable as ever, but inside she was shaken. The public opening of her bag had exposed a crack in the facade she had built, and she knew it was only a matter of time before someone dug deeper. In Chicago, Elena checked into a nondescript hotel and opened her laptop, connecting to a secure server. She sent a coded message to an old contact, someone she hadn't reached out to in years. They found the box, she wrote. I need to move. The response came quickly. Stay low. We're watching. She closed the laptop, her mind racing. The device wasn't just a communication tool. It was a key to a network she had helped build, one that held secrets powerful enough to topple governments. She had hoped to leave that life behind, but the contents of her bag had made that impossible. Over the next few days, Elena moved carefully, changing hotels and using cash to avoid leaving a digital trail. She knew the TSA would share the incident with federal agencies, and her aliases, though clean, wouldn't hold up under intense scrutiny. The photograph of Sophia haunted her. She had kept it as a reminder of why she had walked away from her old life, but now it felt like a liability, a clue to her vulnerability. Meanwhile, Agent Harris couldn't let the case go. The device was unlike anything he had seen, and the tech experts he consulted were equally baffled. They confirmed it was not a weapon, but its purpose remained unclear. Harris dug into Elena's background, finding only fragments: a birth certificate, a few tax records, nothing that explained the contents of her bag. He reached out to a contact at the FBI, who hinted that Elena's profile matched someone they had been tracking years ago, a ghost who operated under multiple names, always slipping through their fingers. As Elena planned her next move, she received a call from an unknown number. She answered cautiously, her instincts on high alert. The voice on the other end was familiar, one she hadn't heard in years. "They're closing in," the voice said. "You need to disappear again." Elena's heart sank. She had tried to build a new life, one where she could one day reconnect with Sophia, but the contents of her bag had undone years of careful planning. Elena made a decision. She would return to New Mexico, to the town where she was born, a place she hadn't visited in decades. It was a risk, but it was also the last place anyone would look for her. She booked a flight under a new alias, one she hadn't used in years, and packed her bag with only the essentials. The photograph of Sophia went into her pocket, close to her heart. In New Mexico, Elena rented a small house on the outskirts of town, blending into the quiet community. She avoided technology, knowing it could betray her. She spent her days reflecting on her past, the missions she had carried out, the lives she had touched, and the daughter she had left behind. The weight of her secrets was heavy, but she clung to the hope that she could one day leave it all behind for good. Back in Denver, Harris received a report from the tech team. The device had been partially decrypted, revealing fragments of data, coordinates, names, dates. It was enough to confirm his suspicions. Elena was no ordinary traveler. He passed the information to his superiors, who escalated it to a task force specializing in counterintelligence. But by then, Elena had vanished, her trail gone cold. Months later, a small package arrived at a modest home in California, addressed to Sophia. Inside was a letter, written in Elena's careful hand, and the photograph from the airport. The letter was brief, saying only, "I'm sorry I couldn't be there. I love you always." Sophia, now 12, held the photograph tightly, her father watching with a mix of sorrow and understanding. He knew little of Elena's past, only that it was a world he could never fully grasp. Elena's story didn't end in New Mexico. She moved again and again, each time shedding a piece of her past. The contents of her bag had revealed her true identity, not just as a former operative, but as a mother, a woman who had sacrificed everything to protect those she loved. The airport incident became a footnote in TSA records, a curiosity that lingered in the minds of those who had seen it. But for Elena, it was a reminder that no secret stays buried forever, and that the truth, once revealed, could never be contained again.